Hey, welcome back to the Field and Faith podcast. I'm your host, Chris Barton. With me as always,
Luke D in the house.
Yes, he is. You know, it's been a very interesting few weeks. We know we've kind of taken a little bit longer of a time off, which is ironic because today, Practical Theology, episode number 2, is all about time and time management and how we're not doing a great job with it all the time. But there are some things that we've done over the years that we would just like to share with you guys for like wisdom purposes that may help you, especially younger men, married men, and all different categories of life. So Luke, I'm going to turn it over to you, man. Why is it so important that we spend our time as men of God?
Well, time is money. Time is value. Time is where you're investing things in. So time can be really what you make it. So I know myself, I try to put myself on a daily schedule, which is now out the window because my work schedule is so chaotic and out of control that my time is really not being spent in a place that I would like it to be. And it's not getting invested in an area that I would like to be. So I know myself and some of the things that we talk about, right, that we as a human and as a man that we're an engine with 3 cylinders of spiritual, mental, and physical. When one of those areas is off, right, my spiritual life is a little off because my time is off. Everything else is just off, and I'm in a bubble of stress and all kinds of stuff because of my time and where I'm investing that time. So your time is so incredibly valuable in so many different areas and so many reasons.
Yeah, and I think it kicks off a little bit with what we talked about last time, which, the money aspect of things, and realizing that our cost is actually a greater association of our time. It costs us something in everything that we do if we choose to do this over this. If we're working 80-hour weeks, the cost is our relationship with our family, our relationship with our wives, our relationship with our kids. And if we're working 40 hours a week and we're really diligent about like setting up hard parameters with our work and, hey, this is my hours, this is when I work, this is what I do, and we have those hard parameters, we're able to kind of free ourselves up for some of the other things that allow us to kind of feed those 3 things that you just mentioned, our spiritual, our physical, and our mental. And so when those do become off, we recognize that it's a limitation of who we are. And it's always, I always say, like, suffering is God's callback to make you realize that God is pulling you back towards him, because the greatest use of our time is the relationships and the kingdom building aspects of our lives. And so the focus of that, we can go into 1,000 different directions on this, but for practical theology, it's your time has a cost. Your time is money. Your time has value, and what you're doing with it matters.
Yeah, and time is of the essence. We're not guaranteed a certain amount of time. So the things that we have to get done and want to get done and need to get done, they all take time, and a lot of time and short amounts of time. And yet we try to find ourselves using time to just waste time. I mean, how many times can we say time in a sense? But yeah.
You did a good job there.
Thanks.
That was really good.
Yeah. But, I find myself trying to waste time, and I have no time to even waste time right now. And I know even just one of the things, I'll just share a story from actually last night of just the Spirit talking to me about time and trying to share with my heart of like, hey, you need to do this. And, I'll tie it to scripture aspect in a minute, but I was just driving home from work and just being like, gosh, today really sucked. My time was spent doing stuff that brought 0 value to my life. 0 value to probably anybody else's life. I did nothing ministry related. I did nothing fulfilling. I did nothing it was just busyness and busyness on top of busyness. And I had just terrible interactions everywhere I went throughout the day. And then I was just driving home and this is kind of weird, but the Spirit's like, go home and wrestle with your boys, take your shirts off and just be man. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, first off, the Spirit's never that's just, okay, cool. I'll wrestle with my boys but take your shirts off and I'm like, okay, that's weird. I'm not going to do that, but I'll get home and I'm going to lay on the floor, because when I lay on the floor, that means it's go time and the boys are going to jump on me. So I laid on the floor. I got home, just laid on the floor, exhausted, tired, sweaty. Laid on the floor. Boys come, start wrestling. One son takes his shirt off. Like, what the heck? The other one wants to be like brother, so he takes his shirt off. And I'm like, what? Okay, thanks, Spirit. We've never done this before, wrestling with our shirts off. So all right, well, now I got to take my shirt off, and we're just wrestling and just spent time just being boys, being men, and just spending 5-10 minutes of quality time with my boys, and it was so fulfilling and kind of got me out of my entire 12 hours of funk that I had been for the entire day.
Yeah, so it's amazing how little bits of that can rejuvenate the soul in different capacities. Because, from a research perspective, what you just did with them, it has tremendous amounts of like psychological bonding value, especially fathers and young men. And so when I say young men, I'm talking about your boys, obviously, 3 years old, and how old's Hunter now? 9. I was going to say 10. But those things are what kind of facilitate, confidence and, self-value and self-worth. Are they going to cry every now and then? Absolutely, because, there's the value of actual rough play with your kids. And that time spent in that capacity, allows for that bonds of trust, because, there is a lot of trust when you're picking up your kid, throwing up over, spinning him over his head, and then slamming him on the couch. Like, there is a lot of trust that goes into that they are basically placing themselves in your hands, even though they're trying to fight you and bite you, because your older one's a biter. And those are good things. And, it just kind of builds the bonds of a father and a son together. And it's a great use of time. Like you said, what was it, 5 minutes?
Yeah, like just 10 minutes. That's all it takes, 5 to 10 minutes. And everybody thinks is like, okay, well, I got to plan out this weekend 6 months in advance and spend time with my kids. And it's like, you don't have to spend 3 solid days in a row. Just imagine if you invested 5 minutes a day over a 6-month period.
Yeah.
Like, those 5 minutes would add up even more than a 3-day weekend, where you're probably really not going to be invested because you've been working so hard and stressed out that you just want to relax when you get to that 3-day weekend.
Yeah. I mean, we've very limited, especially like now that you're back with a full-time job, and you're probably, you're doing more than 40 hours a week right now, right?
Yeah.
Getting a lot of emails at different night hours, and just trying to facilitate, again, running a nonprofit, doing this, doing that, trying to stay up to date with the communication aspects of Field and Faith. And there is a loss to a lot of that. And 5 minutes is, not necessarily what you probably want to give, but it is enough to facilitate some of those aspects, those yearnings of a young boy looking up to their father and like wanting to play, wanting to wrestle, wanting to gain those upper hands essentially on dad. And, this also goes for somebody who's an uncle. And that's what I've been my entire life. And I am a jungle gym for every single parent of every single one of my friends. They know they have that. And it's weird how that trust goes in. And I'll just say, like, a good friend of ours, John, his 2 kids, I've spent more and more time with them. And their youngest one, Cooper, he just had his 3rd birthday. He's finally like cracked open his shell, just like Hunter did with me those years ago. And now all of a sudden, it's every single time he sees me, he knows he's going to get thrown in the air, he's going to get caught, and he's going to get tossed over the shoulder. And, hey, buddy, how are you? I'm good. And it's those relationships that you don't realize are having such a deep impact, because his mom, on Mother's Day, they were doing their Mother's Day celebration, and he looked at Grandpa and he looked at Mom and he goes, I go see Uncle Chris now. And she was just like, and I just felt worthless on Mother's Day. He's like, I want to go wrestle. I want to go fight. It was just that intuition of, hey, this is a safe place. This is, where you can like have those times where you can wrestle, where you can, kind of explore that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's even biblical too, right? A kid just knows what they want to do, right? We always talk about like have the heart of a child, and it's like a kid knows what the spirit needs and wants, and it goes and does those things. It's like we get so distracted in life, and I love looking at scriptures like Paul in Acts, where he's talking about going to Macedonia, and it's all these places along the way on his way to Macedonia, and he chooses to not stop because the Spirit's calling him to Macedonia. And he's like, well, I could have preached here, I could have preached here, I could have preached here, but I have to go to Macedonia because that's where the Spirit's leading me. It's like, how many times are we just like walking down that path? It's like, well, I need to get here, but man, this TikTok video looks pretty good. Oh, hey, there's a sale. Maybe I'll go to the store real quick and check this out. Hey, maybe, I'm going to go outside and just water the plants real quick, and then I'm going to start doing yard work, or I'm going to start sitting on, whatever. It's like, man, if we actually just listen to what the Spirit's calling us to do, it's like, the Spirit doesn't always want us to work. And I learned that years ago when I had actually a pastor speak over me. It was just like, the Lord is so impressed with your work ethic, but he wants to know where your joy's at. And are you actually listening to what he wants for you?
Ooh.
And I was just like, dang. Because I was like, I'm proud of my work ethic, because I will outwork anybody if I need to. I don't like to, but I will do it if I'm called to do it. And especially when it comes to ministry, I'm going to work my butt off. And just hear that, and I was just like, dang, okay. Because the Spirit wants me to work, but the Spirit also wants me to have joy in it and actually pay attention and be intentional in what I'm doing with it.
Yeah. And I think that as a man, I think there's nothing worse of a feeling than wasted time. I think it's like the reflection of, at the end of the day, what do I want to look back on and what do I want to say I was proud of? And those days that you look back on, you realize, man, there was a lot of wasted time. I think you look back, your high school years, your college years, anytime you look back, you're like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done this. And we chose to use our time to, play video games or watch movies or do something else. And how could our time have been used better? And there's some people that are like, oh, I don't want to work more than 30 hours a week in this young generation. I was like, my mom and I were talking, I was like, college was tough. She goes, yeah, you were working 60 hours a week and going to college full time. It's like, yeah, but like, I kind of miss it because there wasn't like gaps in my day. There was fulfillment at the end of it. And there was, hey, I'm learning, working. And then it was like, get up and do the whole process all over again. And that felt fulfilling in like a weird way, even though it was this giant rat race of, oh, I didn't have time for my friends, or I didn't have time for this, but I still had church on Sundays, or I still had Bible study in this. Like, I still made times for those things that meant something to that spiritual aspect, where it's like the physical drain and the mental drain was getting taken care of as well.
Yeah, and I think as a society too, like rest, we talk about rest and vacations and all that kind of stuff, but we're also not taught to rest. And like rest is for the weak.
That was a transition that I was making. I was like,
yeah.
We have to talk about rest as a value of our time too.
Because if you ask my wife, I am the single worst human being in the world for resting.
Yeah, my wife will say the exact same thing.
If I have a Saturday off, which is fairly rare, I will attempt to sit down with the family and watch a movie or whatever. And within a span of a movie, an hour and a half, I will get up at least 5 times, not to go to the bathroom, not to get a snack, not to get a drink of water, just do something else. Because I cannot sit still. Like even, I don't take naps. And every rare once in a while on Sunday afternoon, after church, I will take a nap. And it is not longer than 30 minutes. And even in those 30 minutes, I will wake up 10 times. Just because I'm like, I can't rest. And so resting and that taking that time to rest is so important. Obviously, we see that with, right? God created the heavens and earth. 6 days rest on the 7th day. How many times did Jesus go into the wilderness to pray and rest and do all this stuff and have solitude? All the time. Why can't we do it?
Well, I think from a societal standpoint, we look and we examine our world, and our world keeps telling us you can't rest. You've got other things. You got to keep doing this. You got to keep doing that. And I think, your and I personality is, we feel that if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And there's a lot of our ministry to where it's like, you show up or I show up, or, if we don't show up, then nobody shows up. If nobody initiates the conversation never happens. And I think that's a lot of the time of burnout that a lot of people feel that are involved in ministry is they're burned out by the constant workings of their environment. And without the most important component, which is rest, good night's sleep, or, just that solitude, that retreating that Jesus constantly did throughout his ministry. Hey, I need to go refill my own cup. I need to do what I need to do in order to do that. And for everyone, it's different. Like some people, like a light work is rest. And that's, I think, me. Where it's like, oh, let me do something like this. This is a little bit soothing. Doing a podcast, this is nice and soothing and restful. But then I also know that after this, I have to edit this podcast, and now I'm right back into work. But there's different components to it. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I want to go with kind of tips and tricks that you've used over the course of your life practically that have bettered your use of time.
Well, I'm actually going to finish off that last piece because I literally was having this conversation with somebody yesterday about my own time and giving myself grace for my time. But I think there's a piece of this with the busyness that actually comes with the experience of my life. So losing my father at such a young age, it becomes a survival aspect of exactly what you said. If I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it? Because if I don't go to work today, who's going to work for my family? If I don't take care of the kid, who's going to, right? Yeah, my wife's going to do all that stuff too. But if I don't do it, like if I die today, is anybody going to take over the ministry? In reality, you could do it, but it's also not your story. So it's like it doesn't have the effectiveness of it.
Exactly.
So the reality is like, if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? And I don't give myself grace because it's like, well, in the reality, it's who else is going to do it? Oh, obviously the Lord's going to do it. He's going to have somebody else rise up, somebody else, you know what I mean? So it's like somebody else will do it if it's the Lord's will and the Lord's desire, he's going to do it one way or another, with or without us. So it's, just giving yourself grace, and which I'm trying to learn because I can't, because I'm just so overcritical of myself and how I do things, and being perfectionist and making everything look the most beautiful and but.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the judgment of our lack of use or good use of time. So, yeah. All right. I'll start off with tips then. Okay. So one of the things that I've used over the course of my life to facilitate time is called gap reading. And what that is filling the gaps of your day with learning. I think one of the most valuable things that a lot of people forget to do, especially now that a lot of us are out of school, is to learn. And I think it craves our brains to want to know things. And so for me, I've always done it with audiobooks. So whether I'm driving in the car, I've got a 20-minute drive to work or a 15-minute drive to church. That's 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back if I'm alone in the car. I might choose to not listen to music because for me, music isn't relaxing. It's repetitive and I've heard this song before. But a new book fills me with a little bit more of a storytelling. And I've gone from books like Jedediah Smith and learning about his outdoorsman life to a lot of spiritual content. And, that feeds a big part of me. And I also know sometimes going and sitting down and reading my Bible is a little bit difficult, but engaging with the Bible app and just playing it, you can get 3 chapters done on a ride to work. And is it the same thing? I don't know. Because there are times when I'm reading my Bible and I've got my commentary, that's a whole different study of my scripture versus just listening to the word and being oh yeah, I like this story. Oh yeah, because I've been through the Gospels a few times. And that's what I continually go through, because I think as a disciple of Jesus, you got to be familiar with his teaching. You have to be familiar with his words, that it almost feels somebody's telling you the same story in a classroom. If you ever had a teacher for 2-3 years in a row and you're oh, I've already heard this story. But it's good to know the ending of a story. It's like toddlers. They watch the same movie 1,000 different times because they want to know, and they want to know what's happening next. And I think that's the way that Jesus kind of wants us to kind of be in a lot of situations, have my word on your heart, always on the forefront of your mind. And I think that's a really valuable way to kind of do that. So that's one tip that I would give. What's one you got?
Well, I'd actually double down on that, because I do the same thing. I do a lot of podcasts in the car. I mean, I spent 8 hours in the car the other day, just driving from work to and everywhere. So I listened to 4 podcasts, and then there got to a point where I was okay, I can't do any more podcasts. So there's all right, I need it. You know what? My spirit's feeling a little weak right now. I need to have 20 minutes of praise and worship. So then just spent praise and worship in the car. But I think it's a good point too, just to have something in your ear, even if it is, having the Bible app in your ear, you can't do anything better than that. Because the reality is why can you go back and you hear a song from the 90s and you instantly know the words? You heard it a bunch of times. Yeah, we're supposed to have the words on our heart at all times. How can you do that? Listen to them at all times. sometimes it gets boring, sometimes it gets repetitive, but it's highly important and to have different variations. But yeah, that's good. It really is good. Man, time for me is sometimes just I try to read too, and it's hard because my time is just all over the place, and I try to do stuff at night, which now that I'm waking up at like 4:30 in the morning and starting my day, by the time I get to nighttime, I'm like can't even keep my eyes open to read a page. But just stopping, like even last night, I put my phone down when I got home, and I was like, I'm not even going to touch my phone until all the kids go to bed. And there was a couple times where I was like, I went to go pick it up just out of habit, and I was like, no, I can't. I got to wait till the kids go to bed. And it wasn't like I was over interacting with the kids and trying to spend more time with the kids, but it's like I was giving my time just to be present and not have that thing attached to me. Because I feel like just getting on my phone is going to bring stress because I'm going to end up looking at work emails, or it's just going to bring dumbness and numbness by swiping at a couple videos or seeing what notifications popped up on LinkedIn and Facebook. It's just like, so that was actually really healing for me yesterday, just to be able to like put my phone down and just see what's actually happening. And it gave me a time of relaxing because I'm not stressing out. I'm not worrying about anything. I'm not trying to just numb the situation.
Yeah, totally. I like that idea, like putting the phone down. I know that'll be a huge struggle, obviously. And I think, I'm getting ready to prepare a message for the first time in a long time. And like my ideas are just like, and it's the same thing. There's too much time to prepare a message. And so now it's like, how do I narrow this down? And I'm preaching on Father's Day, and it'll be the first time like kind of like, oh, wow, I'm in preparation of being a father. And at the exact same time, we had the discussion, well, we didn't do a Mother's Day service. So are we going to do a Father's Day service, and will the mothers all be upset? And I'm like, nobody's going to show up anyways. It's June 16th. It's summertime. Everybody's out of town. It's too hot. As soon as it's too hot, people aren't going to show up. But the way that the Lord's kind of been leading me on this is kind of a wrestling of this exact concept of, how very limited our time is with young people, and how we spend our time is the mirrored reflection of what kids see. And so by reading the Word of God, we are mimicking or in awe of what Jesus had done on earth, because he only had 3 years of ministry. So all 4 of the Gospels, it's not a very long time. And you read the stories and you're like, you think they happen like right after one another, but then there's long periods of gap. My mind always goes like, what were the teachings in between? Because John is very clear. He's like, if we had filled these pages with everything that Jesus had said, like there wouldn't be enough pages in the world to kind of like deal with those. But these were the things that the Spirit, I believe, fell on them. It was like, these are the stories you must tell. These are the ones that will draw people closer to the Lord and justify that Jesus is the Messiah, which is the argument that I have every day of my life at my school. And because I work with Jewish kids, and it's the one thing that separates believers from non-believers is those who are imitating the life, love, and resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, that's good, man. Man, I don't even know. The idea of time, I always think about too is like, what, the idea of what goes into your body is not important. It's what comes out of it. And I think too, just the time spent, because that's an investment of something you're putting into you. So it's like, are you choosing to watch TV? Okay, what shows are you watching? Like that's the time invested and it's going into you. Okay, well, what is that producing and coming out of you? Especially, I think, people, I feel like forever in the church, people talk about like, you should never listen to secular music and secular movies. It's like, I don't know if I agree on either side of that, but I get why, right? If you're listening to music that has a lot of swearing in it, well, your natural habit is going to be to probably start swearing a little bit more. Yeah. So is that something good of your time of like investing that? Yeah, you might like it, but it's like, what's going to produce of that time spent? It's like, well, now you're going to start cussing and you're going to start saying this. It's the same thing with the certain people you hang out with. Why do we talk about cutting arms off, cutting branches off trees and stuff? Like you have to get rid of some of that stuff in order for you to actually produce the fruit that you're supposed to be. And that's a time piece, where your time is invested is what's going to be returned back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would like, if you're listening to this, like, and if you're ever on YouTube, There's an amazing video that I always use to show my students called Your Time in Jelly Beans. And the guy just has like all these jelly beans, like of like what the average life is, how much you're going to spend time like brushing your teeth, how many times you're going to spend sleeping, how much time you're going to do in this. And then like he ends the video with all of these jelly beans, like each one of these jelly beans like represents a day of your life. And it's just this massive pile of jelly beans. And he counts them all out. Like, this is the time that you're going to spend in a car. This is the amount of time that you're going to spend in the shower. This is the amount of time that you're going to spend sleeping. And then he ends with like this little question mark, and you just see how little time comes left. And like, what are you going to do with this? And it's just this question mark filled out. And you're like, this is how much time you're going to have left for laughing, playing, going on vacation, and spending time with your kids. What are you going to do with it? And it was just like, it's a slap in the face because it's jelly beans, but it's so impactful. And I would highly recommend like somebody go and watching that, because it really does put into perspective like that value of it. And when you realize that there's a sense, not necessarily a sense of urgency, but there is a sense of value that we get, that, you know, we aren't promised tomorrow, first and foremost, but that there is a lot that we can get done, and to take advantage of those times, to sit down with your wife, sit down with your girlfriend, sit down with your kids, and invest.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, just Western culture in general, is we take life for granted and time for granted. It's like, you know, just the idea of numbering your days, and, you know, everybody talks about like live like you're, you know, Tim McGraw, live like you're dying. You know, that's the greatest song. But I remember maybe, you know, I had somebody speak prophetically and like kind of gave me a number for my life, and which, you know, most people like, sounds terrifying. It's like, no, it's a shorter amount of time than probably most, but it's like, dude, I know how much time I have left, roughly. So, like, I got to go get it now. But also, it's like, now I need to spend more intentional time. It's like, and it changed my vision of the way I saw stuff. Like, now I can wake up in the morning and make my cup of coffee and sit on my couch, and I look out my front door, which has a window in it, and I see the trees, and I see how green the trees are. And, like, I appreciate what I see so much clearly and different now, because I actually see stuff now where I feel like, you know, your whole life you're just going. Busyness creates blinders. And it's like, I can actually see the color of stuff. I can see the detail of stuff, and I have an appreciation for the things around me because I have a number set. I have a time frame, like, and I understand that tomorrow is not guaranteed. Like, being able to hug my kid this morning, like, that's not guaranteed tomorrow or even later today. And so, like, to be able to appreciate that and love that and enjoy that, like, you have to change your perspective and understand that.
That's good. That's good. I think we're going to leave it there. And remember, when you're hunting, you got nothing but time, staring at nothing, trying to find an elk across the hill.
But you get to sit in the woods, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And you get to be weirded out like me, where I'm like always thinking there's a mountain lion behind me at all times, because a lot of times I hunt by myself. Or you think there's like a snake in the grass rolling around behind you or something. You just never know.
And this is how I die.
Yeah. Which I loved on that turkey hunt, that you were just by yourself. That brought me so much joy, knowing you were sitting by yourself, having no idea what was around you.
Yeah. It was this, like, and that's what's weird about the forest. We're getting on a sidetrack here. That's what's weird about the forest, because a squirrel rustling around in the bushes is the exact same thing as a mountain lion.
A squirrel actually makes more sound in the forest than a bear does. You know what I mean?
Does it really?
Because you think about, so here's a fun story. We'll end with the story.
End it with this story.
So this last year we were in Virginia and we were squirrel hunting, because that's just what you do when you're in Virginia. And we're sitting down and it's the fall time, and so the leaves are already on the ground. So like, you can't walk through the forest where it doesn't sound like an elephant running through the forest at all times. And I'm sitting here and you can hear the squirrels coming down the trees, and they jump into the pile of leaves looking for the acorns and everything. And you can tell exactly where the squirrels are. And of course you keep hearing them far away, but you're trying to sit still hoping they're going to come to you. And I remember just sitting there for like an hour, 2 hours, listening to these dang squirrels at a distance. And I started looking down, and like 40 yards away, there's a deer underneath me. And I was like, how in the heck did these deer sneak in? You can hear every little pin drop in this forest. There is crushed giant piles of leaves everywhere. and these deer just walked in right underneath me, and I didn't hear them. And I was paying attention. I was paying attention to everything around me, and yet these things just snuck in without me even knowing it. But it was awesome to watch.
It's good. Good. All right, y'all. Well, we thank you for spending the time hanging out with us. If you got any tips, tricks, or any other ways that you see like that have like really boosted your time or your productivity, I know people will be like, oh, ice baths, oh, this, oh, that. I don't do those. No ice baths for me. I did them once. I said that was enough. They're cold. But there is a lot of tips, tricks that you can do for your productivity. But remember, time is money. Time has a cost. But be graceful with your time. Be forgiving of yourself when you misuse your time. But also realize that it's valuable.
Yeah, and look us up. Send us a note. We always want to hear from you guys. Prayer requests, whatever it may be. Thoughts, ideas. Look us up, fieldfaith.org. Follow our podcast. Leave us a review, because without you, we can't continue. We are a 501c3, so donations are highly appreciated. It goes straight to our ministry and us to continue doing what we do. So appreciate you guys, and see you next time.
Later.